Welcome to WAVE Channel 20, Auburn Community Television, and this episode of Meet the Artist. I'm Lucinda Laughlin, your host. Meet the Artist is supported by the North Auburn Artist to introduce artists in our local community. Today, we're going to learn about encaustic painting, and there's no one better to tell us about it and show us how to do it than Charlotte Cooper. Charlotte, I'm so glad you could join us.
Glad to be here.
Well, let's start out with basics. The first question is, what are encaustics?
Encaustic is the name of the medium, which is beeswax and resin. That's all it is, nothing else. The word means burned in. We hope nothing gets actually burned, but rather melted one layer into another. And it's a very ancient medium.
Well, I understand that because while it's new to me, it has been around for a long, long time. So why don't you tell us something about the history?
It originated in the Middle East, in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, probably with Greek sailors and fishermen sealing their boats with beeswax, and then adding resin to make it harder, and then adding color. By about 2500 BC, before Christ, they were painting things like the Acropolis. All those Greek buildings were once painted with this, and Greek portrait painters were making portraits
with this process. This is absolutely amazing.
They used many more pigments by then, but mostly they used black and white and a whole range of ochres, and occasionally blue if they could get it, but mostly black, white, and kind of yellows and browns. And with that, they got all the skin tones and just a wide range of color.
Now, is the color that's added with pigment? Is that put in the resin, or is that put directly into the beeswax?
What you do is, and what they did, is to melt the beeswax so it's liquid and melt the resin, tree resin, which comes, well, we get ours from Southeast Asia, but they got it who knows where, just it's tree sap. You melt that, mix it together, and then add the pigment. And you can add, I do add powdered pigment, which is, some of it is basically dirt. The ochres are just rocks that are ground fine. And of course now we have other colors as well, but that's still what we mostly use. You put the powder in the liquid, stir it up like gravy, and there you are.
Well, let's go to some of your paintings because you are going to give a demonstration today. So I want everybody to see what you can do with this process, and then you'll show us the process.
Good.
So let's talk about the paintings behind us. We have two that look like a night sky. And if you could tell us about them and then kind of the process in making them.
I've become just entranced with the night sky photographs that have come to us in recent years. Just wonderful. And this one is really almost a literal rendition of what some of the night sky photographs look like. This one is more imaginative. It has boxes of stars. I keep thinking of UPS delivering on into the galaxy. And it has star chart lines, navigational lines, which are a recurring theme in many of my paintings. I'm really interested in them for the structure that they give to loose paintings and for what they mean to the human mind, how to get someplace.
Now, how do you get those scratches into the beeswax and resin?
Once it's hardened, and especially when it's hardened and fresh, because it cools and hardens immediately, and then over a period of time it cures. The molecular structure tightens up and it becomes hard, like varnish, which is where the resin comes in. So at any point, but especially when it's fresh but still cooled, I can use any sharp tool, a sharp nail, um, a dental tool, a ceramic tool, or my favorite, a pair of cuticle scissors because they fit in my hand. Um, the handle fits in the palm of my hand and I have a lot of control. I use a straight edge and just pull the line through.
And then once you do that, do you come in and because you have the white within it, or is that residual that's left so you don't have to do anything else with it?
Oh, some of the white is underneath. And the cool thing about white is it's very resistant. It melts last, which is why we all should have white cars in Sacramento. And the dark, which I make thinner as well, will melt first. So this, the white is underneath, and I've melted it with a heat gun or a propane torch, and let the dark melt and the white emerge. And then, in addition, I've scattered white on top. So there's white underneath and there's white on top.
So this is a layering process that you use.
Very much layered, melted in, hence the word encaustic, melted in one layer into the next layer.
Now the one that is behind me, this one I love, even though it's not as dynamic as what we have here, but it's such a beautiful swirl of a nest.
A nest.
And so how do you go about getting that using the encaustics?
Oh, that's so much fun to work on. The first part I did was the white, and the white underneath is over darker colors underneath, if, as you can see as soon as I mention it. So when that was down and cured, I went back and on the cured surface, using my handy little tools, started cutting into it, just one line after another, many, many lines. And if you touch it, which you can, this is very sturdy stuff unless it's seriously whacked. I cut the lines in, and then I brushed on some color, some encaustic color, and cut some more lines in, and then I put in some oil stick, which is oil, beeswax, a linseed oil, and a heavy, heavy load of pigment. Rubbed those in the deep scratches, rubbed off the surface, and just left the color in the deep scratches. And I did a lot of that, and it's a lot of fun.
Now I noticed that these are on, it looks like wood.
They are in wood.
And is there a reason for that?
Yes, encaustic needs to be done on a rigid surface because the wax is flexible, and if I were to put it on canvas, something this big would crack.
Because there's enough of a give in that canvas.
Enough of a give in the canvas, yeah.
Now you also, because there's nothing protecting these, there's no glass, don't they get dusty?
Well, they do get dusty, and then you dust them.
So you just, with a regular cloth?
A soft cloth.
And you just come along and rub it? And
right.
Does that bring up, what, shine? Kind of like when you wax your furniture?
Well, there are two things. If it's been hanging on your wall for a long time, you probably need to dust it. But in addition to that, when it's buffed, and I want to do this gently because I don't want to knock it off the wall, when you buff it, it brings up a shine. And that's the shine that comes from the resin being there, like a shellac almost. And then not only does it shine, but it becomes more translucent so that you see what's underneath.
So you're kind of rejuvenating it.
Yeah.
So you also brought some smaller pieces, and let's talk about those. And one of the ones I find is particularly interesting is the Japanese paper.
Yes.
And if you could explain this process to me.
This has several layers. It has some pale gold underneath. Then I drop some, these are cinders. some charcoal from a fireplace in it, rubbed it in, put a pale green over it, put a piece of old Japanese paper in it, and covered it with wax. This probably has 3, 4, 5 layers of encaustic medium on it. And then the last thing I did was to put another layer of deeper gold on it. Oh, not the last thing. Then I put some asemic writing, which are characters without any content. They don't mean anything. And then put a line.
Well, you have brought so many wonderful examples, but the key to this interview is that you're going to give a demonstration.
I am.
And so, because I want to have as much time as possible for that demonstration, let's go ahead and move to that. And you can show us this process, which will make you marvel even more at what we have here.
Well, it is a marvelous process. This here, here are the basics. Piece of beeswax. In this case, it's bleached so that it doesn't have the yellow in it. A chunk of resin, which I smash up with a hammer before I combine them. And when you put them together, you get this. This is it. I'm going to melt this in a frying pan. I have a large steel plate at home, but this is fine. Oh, and add the color.
What temperature does this have to be when you're getting this
Encaustic
melted?
melts between about 190 and 210, which means that it will melt in the back of your car on a sunny day, or if you put it where it gets too much direct sunlight. However, passing sunlight won't bother it at all. This is a piece that I'm not particularly happy with. I'm going to just melt some of it off.
So this is something that you can do with a piece that you've done a couple years ago or even yesterday that you're not happy with.
Absolutely.
And so when you do this melting process, does it just drip then off of the board that you have? Or
It's
do you...
going to drip right off.
Okay.
There it goes.
Now, what is the heating equipment that you use when you're at home?
This is a heat gun.
Uh-huh.
You buy it at the hardware store and you use it to take paint off the fender of your car or off the old piece of furniture that you want to refinish. Okay. I'm going to put a little yellow. I've got the beeswax melted in here, the encaustic beeswax and resin together. I'm going to put just a little of this yellow. This is the pure pigment. It's as much of a load of color as they can get in it. And while I can use this is handier. And this is safer. You don't want to inhale this.
So does the color, then that melts into that? Is that the process that's going on there?
Yeah.
Also, then you just paint it on.
You just paint it on. I'm going to put it all the way across. And even now, just one layer on top of another, the colors begin to glow.
And you can still see that layer that was below
Yes, you can.
is coming through it. Now, why are you applying the heat gun again?
Because I want to melt one layer into the next. If I don't, they'll separate, kind of like French pastry separates in layers, and you want it to be more like a solid roll. So I'll let this cool just a moment. This is a ceramic tool. I'm going to clean the edge off. This is how quickly it cools. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of blue in here.
Now before you put the color in, you put more beeswax in there before you do that?
I'm working with a very small amount of beeswax.
Okay.
At home, I probably would have several pots set up.
And do you have a separate pot for each color then?
I do if I'm working any size at all. Okay, a little more blue here. And at home I have a big propane torch. I go through propane quite rapidly.
I notice that you've changed directions when you're turning this. Does that give a different effect if you're doing it in the different directions, or?
Sometimes it does. You can see the brush marks if I put them on dry, as in, you know, not a whole lot of medium in them, like this. But I'm just going to add some more up here.
Well, I can certainly see just the layers and layers that you must have used, particularly in doing some of these, the star one that we have on the wall here.
Yeah. Yes, layers and layers. It's a very physical kind of thing. It's physically demanding, and I enjoy that.
Now, do you like working with a smaller piece like the one you're working on, or do you like doing the great big ones?
No, I like doing the great big ones. The little ones are okay, but the great big ones are just so much fun.
Now, when you start doing these, do you have an idea in mind exactly what you're trying to create?
I usually do, and they are often, and you can see what happens. I can do this pretty easily. They're often abstractions of landscapes or sky. Sometimes they're just me playing with the pigment to see what will happen.
Now this one you can kind of see the wax as it's kind of running down.
Yeah.
And you can, when you use the heat on it, does that stop that process, or does it actually increase it?
No, it makes it do it more. Okay. And now you'll see that sometimes it completely gets away from you, which is what happened here, and it turned into a pool, which was not what I had in mind.
Now you're applying the color direct onto your...
And I usually don't do that. brush in here.
Well, it certainly does show all the different techniques you can use and creating the textures and the blends.
Yeah, some of it blends and some of it kind of fights. White is kind of a bully color, but now it's made a nice wave effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of liking that. And I'll put it on a lower heat.
It's kind of like sometimes the painting takes on its own life and decides what it's going to be.
The painting certainly does take on its own life. And at that point, and you asked me if I knew what I was going to do when I begin a painting. And the answer is I usually do, but it often changes. And this is now traveling in a way I didn't anticipate.
So, oh, I see it. So it's now coming dripping down.
This cools so fast.
Well, then that creates a unique effect as well.
Well, and over here I'm kind of liking this. And I would put more white up here actually, and just, or maybe more blue. But the other thing I can do, this is still a little, is to pull it off like this.
I love all the way that the colors from beneath show through the layer that's coming up that you're just putting on.
Me too, and it's one of the things I like best about it, that it does show through.
And it's amazing how quickly we've started with one picture and now we have something completely different.
Absolutely. Which is why there are a lot of oh phooey moments, but there also are some wonderful surprises.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I like putting the navigational lines in is that they are moments of control. And you can see how little control I have here.
So it brings control to the chaos.
It brings control.
Now you've been doing this for many years.
I have.
And I understand that you are the founder of the wax. It's a group that works in the wax.
I am one of the founders. There were a handful of us who, maybe about 8 years ago, who had enjoyed doing it so much, went to a conference where there were other people who were indeed in groups, and we came home saying, there are enough people in Sacramento. I'd been teaching for several years by then, and there are enough people doing this in Sacramento so that we should be getting together and talking about it. And so Sierra Wax Artists was born. You can go online and find them. And we meet every 3 months and have a presenter and have shows, juried shows. And we're really trying to support and promote the highest technical level of encaustic practice that we can. It's been a lot of fun.
Now, do you give lessons in working with encaustic?
I have in the past. I taught for the Learning Exchange for about 10 years. But at this point, I do workshops for people who ask, who come to my home, but I don't do series of classes anymore.
Well, why don't you, we have a little bit more time, so if you want to come and sit down, if you're finished with the demonstration.
I think I am. There's going to be scraping off going on here later.
Yeah, I notice all the edges around your work is always very cleaned. And
Yes, and that's taken off like this, but it's also taken off with an iron. And the iron I use is the same iron that they use to wax skis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, since we have a little bit of time, I love this because this shows the layering that you can do with the encaustic. And this is a process where you actually start in the middle and then it moves out. Is that?
Yes, this one was. This has blue underneath and yellow underneath, and then some.
Just hold it right here.
Okay, some blue on top, and then the heat gun or the propane torch is held directly over it, and it spreads. And I really can't show it here because it has to be done absolutely flat and level. It spreads out and pushes all the color, and then a little bit of yellow is added, and that little bit of yellow spread out there as well. And the red dot was put down and it spread.
Now, you're going to be at the Placer Art Studio tour.
I am.
So why don't you tell our viewers how they can find you on that tour and how they can get in contact with you and maybe talk more about your work.
You can find me in my garage studio in Lincoln Hills. Easy to find if you have a Placer art map, or if you have a GPS. You can look me up at charlottecooper.com or Cooper Encaustics. CooperEncaustic.com. I'm right around the corner from Neil DeVore, who is a marvelous wood turner and makes big, gorgeous bowls out of burls. So we're kind of a 2-for-1 over there.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. A pleasure to be here.
And I want to thank you for tuning in to WAVE Channel 20 Auburn Community Television, or maybe you're watching us on YouTube. We appreciate your viewership. We hope that you'll go on the studio tour because you'll find some local artists, I'm sure, in your neighborhood. Thank you.